Going from an ale to cider, both kinds, to juice and many products, it's time to explore the second track of Saccharomyces, baking! The dessert we attribute as being the ultimate inspiration for Appletun, good old apple pie, dates back to a written recipe published before the discovery that yeast is a fungi, mushrooms are, in 1381, referred to as a tortoise in Apples. Huh. While we know the apple pie for having a buttery, flaky crust, the originals were far from edible, being made out of flour and water, being several inches thick, and only existing to encase the filling in coffins, making caskets made of pastry. Yeah, having a body that heavy would make a dragon type like Appletun as slow as molasses, and its skin contains flour. Actually, making flour is really easy. Just take a grain, then put in its berries. Not those berries! There you go. Grind it in a mill, and voila! You have flour. Whereas Appletun's natural yeast, again, fungi, gains power through fermentation via something called adenosine triphosphate. That will be my only Bill reference. Then feast on either sugars or carbohydrates, which is interesting, because when any fungi make fermentation in bread through an aerobic pathway, it does the exact opposite of a plant.
Photosynthesis!
Creating CO2, or carbon dioxide, like we do, which makes dough nice and soft or fluffy from basically burping. Come here. In the bread. Bakers call this leavening or raising. It's a food agent, if you will. While there's active dry, instant, or rapid rise types of yeast that are marketed, an Appletun would have fresh yeast. In this worm's body, while its sugars feed its yeast, and when it adds salt to its diet, it would counter most of the nasty bacteria that affect its processes. Curiously, an Appletun produces a nectar, which would be made by organs called nectaries or nectarines. Hilarious. Nectar is made as a byproduct from consuming sugars. Are we its bees, feeding off its body strips to help it cycle? They eat, then manufacture consumable scales while it loafs around. Appletun is its own mill, taking its own yeast, salt, sugar, which is eaten granules of wheat berries to produce delicious dough scales. It's quite fascinating to think the same mon is capable to attack with its own internal acids, albeit less acidic than what Flapple could create, as its acid is somehow corrosive.
That don't make no sense!
So you could make the argument that inside an Appletun's body, seeds could at some point become malt after consuming enough water in its casket-like stomach to awaken a magical enzyme already existing in the grain when it starts sprouting. When those seeds are tricked to have been convinced they've had enough rain, they start germinating and produce amylase. Enzymes are proteins that trigger a whole genetic process building from its own internal amino acids. Those seeds, at that stage, contain a wealth of starches that break down into sugars. They're reserves of food for the plant later, until it makes its own through
photosynthesis.
It makes maltose, specifically at this point in its growth. Appletun has plumules like this, which bear cotyledon that
Reach for the sky!
and never get to its full plant stage, being acrospires. Unfortunately, the process of baking tends to stop Protus's ultimate potential. Cold! But it's important for us to know that the yeast takes over, like with Paris. Yes, even yeast eats amylase. But what if you wanted another dessert mon that fills the role of a special attacker?